everybody, it's Annabelle and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining, and today we're going to be doing some more media tests. Today we are going to be looking at Seramis and we're going to be taking a bit of a deep dive into Seramis. So this video is exclusively on Seramis, very specific. Hope it's okay. I love this sort of thing. Videos are getting more and more nerdy each time, I feel. Hope that's alright with everyone, but obviously I'm going to try and pepper these with normal plant videos, not just nerdy media videos. We've got more coming though. So if you like that type of video, that's great for you. If not, I am going to try doing more normal plant videos as well, so bear with. So we are going to be talking all about Seramis, which is a granular clay substrate which is made of calcined diatomaceous earth. It's supposed to have a neutral to slightly acidic pH and be the equivalent product to Danish Moler Clay. So we're going to check this out. I ordered some horticultural grade Danish Moler Clay, not cat litter. So this is from Kaizen Bonsai, which is a bonsai supply store in the UK, and it's actually very reasonable value. And you can see that it's actually quite a large grade compared to Seramis, which I will get onto. And then we have large grade Seramis. So this is Seramis grade that you can buy from Orchid, and this is what you get when you purchase their Seramis. They don't have any different grades, they don't sell this as large grade, they just sell this as their clay substrate, and this is large grade Seramis, which I'm so excited about. Seramis holds more water than LECA, so a large grade is going to provide more aeration but also more water than LECA. So very excited. We're going to test its pH, we're going to test its wicking efficiency, we're going to test how quickly it dries, we're going to do all of those things. Very exciting. Those of you who know me and know my channel, you know that I get a little bit too excited about rocks that I can grow orchids in, to the extent that recently I was looking at the gravel on the driveway thinking, oh, that would be a great top layer. Yeah, so I love rocks and I love orchid rocks. I have a special relationship with orchid rocks and rocks that I can use for orchids. So this just ticks all of my boxes. Then as a comparison, we've got my normal grade Seramis. I'm going to pour some out just to show you. We are going to need to wash all of these before we start our media test. So I'll just get some Seramis out to show you. So this is the stuff that I work with, and when I'm talking about Seramis, this is the grade that I've been talking about up until now. I wasn't 100% aware that these different grades existed. I had seen Miss Orchid Girl's video a few years ago talking about a larger grade Seramis, but I never really looked into it. I was never interested in ordering from Orchid. They're very expensive. My budget for orchids has increased somehow as they've taken over more and more of my life. So now going back to it and looking at it, I was like, no, that's okay, I can do, that's fine, I can do that as a test. And it actually turns out that Wickman or Wickman Orchidine in Germany sell bags of Seramis. And I have some information that the bags that they sell may be this grade. So I'm going to order some and we're going to look, because no one specifies and it's all very hit and miss. And I just want to know where I can get my small grade Seramis and where I can get some larger grade Seramis. And then we have the Danish Moler Clay, which is kind of an intermediate grade, if you can see. So, we're going to test all these out. I'm going to pour some back of this because what we want is to fill these 3 cups to the same kind of level, and they've conveniently given us a line. So I'm going to fill to there so that we have the same volume of each, and then I'm going to weigh them so that we can test how much water they take on. This is all kind of rough, but roughly to that line. And then we're going to do our Danish Moler Clay. And then last but not least, we're going to do the large grade Seramis. So one thing I should point out is Seramis is quite a dusty material. So this might not necessarily be entirely fair, because when I rinse this, what I'm going to end up doing is rinsing dust off, which is going to alter the weight. So we're going to wash these properly, I've decided. So I'm going to go and wash them off in my usual way, get rid of all the excess dust, and then dry them out, and then we will start and weigh them. So fast forward in time. Okay, so we're back. Took a while for all of these to dry out, and eventually I had to put them into trays and just put them outside in the sunshine to get them to dry. So we're going to take a dry weight. They've been thoroughly washed, so they're free of dust. So I'm just going to pour them back into the cups, take a 0 measurement for the cups, and then weigh them. So now we're just going to take a weight measurement for each using an empty cup as the 0 measurement. So the Kaizen Danish Moler Clay, we've got 155 grams of dry weight. 0 that again. Now we're going to do the Orchid Seramis, 94 grams. $99 grams of the small Seramis. So now what I'm going to do is pour water into each of them up to the same level, and also some water in here, and then we're going to come back tomorrow and pour off the water once it's been sat for 24 hours and do a pH measurement, and then we're going to take a weight after a 24-hour soak to see how much water they have absorbed each and measure that, and then we're going to look at how long they take to dry and take some weight measurements during like a week dry period, because we would be looking at kind of a week to 10-day wet dry cycle in organic media. And in organic media, obviously we often use in self-watering or semi-hydro setups, so it never goes dry, but it'll also give us a kind of idea of how quickly they lose water, and that may transfer to the kind of dry top layer and the extent to which they suffer from it. So we're going to come back tomorrow and do the weight measurement. I'll just pop some water in these cups. So I've poured the same amount of water into each of these cups, and one thing I would say is that the Danish Moler Clay, like when I did the media test for the Sunny Cat version of the cat litter Danish Moler Clay, it bubbles a lot. I do wonder if it is a slightly different product to Seramis, if Seramis is somehow treated in a different way to Danish Moler Clay is, or refined differently, that gives it slightly different qualities. Not sure. Obviously we'd have a job getting that information from the manufacturer, because that's why Seramis is unique. It is kind of bubbling a little bit, but not quite to the same extent as the straight molar. Gives it slightly different qualities. Not sure. So yeah, not sure about that. When I tested it last time, the Sunny Cat cat litter version of the Danish Moler Clay, which was obviously a cheaper version than the horticultural Danish Moler Clay, although actually in terms of price, I think they worked out about the same getting it from Kaizen Bonsai as horticultural Danish Moler, and they look pretty much the same. But I wondered if it was some sort of treatment that they did to the cat litter, but obviously not, because the horticultural one is doing exactly the same. So we'll take a pH measurement. I suspect that this is going to have an acidic pH, because that's the pH that the Sunny Cat had before. And then we will kind of continue with the experiment tomorrow. After a 24-hour soak in water, and I put the same volume of water in each, so I filled all of them up to this line with water and then just poured it in. And then I'm going to leave this tap water to sit as well as our kind of baseline water measurement, because obviously we want to see what the pH of my tap water is and compare how the media has changed it, and also obviously leaving tap water standing may potentially alter pH. So leave it for 24 hours and come back. Okay, so I'm back and we are just take some pH measurements. It's actually been soaking for 2 days. I got a bit distracted with moving and stuff, so pH will fluctuate over time. It can go up, it can go down. It depends kind of on the situation and what's in the water. So obviously water evaporates off, but we'll leave behind the salts and solutes and minerals that were in, for example, the tap water that I'm using, and those will have a higher pH. So the relative pH of the solution will probably go up in time depending on various factors, not just the evaporation rate, but also your temperature and your environment, because there's a constant like dissociation going on in solution of different ions and molecules, and that can affect the pH basically. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but pH will fluctuate if you leave water standing over time. After 2 days stood around of my tap water is 8.68. So now we're going to look for the change in pH that these have caused, because that's what's important to us, the actual amount that the media that's in there has changed the pH. I'm just going to pour off the liquid. Just gently swirl that to get it to kind of reach equilibrium, and I'm just going to leave it to stand. So that is reading 8.30, so it was around 8.69 before, so it's gone down by about 0.39 per pH unit. So the Orchid top Seramis has decreased the pH by 0.39, so I'm just going to put the pH on here. Just going to get rid of that and just rinse out the jug and our pH probe. And next we're going to pH the solution of the water that was with the Danish Moler Clay, which is a horticultural molar clay. So we can already see that that pH is going down quite a lot, so I'm just going to leave that to settle. And it's very important that your pH reading isn't fluctuating too much. If it is fluctuating a lot and flickering a lot between a few different measurements, it can be that the calibration needs redoing, and once you recalibrate it tends to be giving a much more stable measurement. That's a whole other topic. I'm not going to go into that today on calibration, but I personally feel that calibration frequently is important for pH meters, but that's just my personal opinion. So I'm just going to wait for this to settle. So that's giving a fairly stable reading of around 7.65. So I'm just going to write that down. So that's gone down quite a lot with the horticultural molar, which is in line with the previous experiment we did with the Sunny cat litter, which was supposed to be pure Danish Moler Clay. This one is horticultural pure Danish Moler Clay, and Danish Moler Clay is calcined diatomaceous earth. It's supposed to have a pH of around 5.5 on its own, so obviously it's going to bring down the pH of your solution that's sat with it. So pH has gone down to 7.64 of that, so I'm just going to put 7.64. So it's down by quite a lot. And then we're just going to rinse off the pH probe again and the jug and do the small grade Seramis. And what I'm using to rinse this is actually just the water that's been sat around to bring it back up to that baseline pH. I could use distilled water, which would be better for rinsing like in between if we were doing nutrients or something, but I feel like it's important to bring it back up to that baseline pH each time, because I'm keeping that quite consistent then. As long as I'm doing the same thing each time consistently, it should be fine, but that's just personally the way I feel like doing it today. I'm just going to pour off the solution that's been sitting for 2 days with the small Seramis. I'm just going to leave that to settle for a few minutes. So while I've done that, I just used a sieve to make sure all of the water was drained out, all of the like loose water that's not being held onto by the media. So we're at a starting point for when we weigh. But this has been sitting for a while and it's settling around 8.15. So it was at 1.5 and I just sort of gently swirled it, went down to 1.4, then back up to 1.5. So I think we're at a good settling point. So pH of that water for the small Seramis is 8.15. So it's gone down still, but not quite as much as the Moler Clay. I'm going to graph these all at the end, but I'm just writing them down for easy reference points. Okay, and now what we're going to do is we're going to weigh all of the pots. Obviously I weighed them when they had like a dry weight after I'd washed them and dried them. So I'm just going to weigh the pots. Emptied off the water cup, so we'll use that as our zero measurement. So So the small Seramis, after soaking for 48 hours, now weighs 230 grams, and it was 99 grams to start with. The horticultural Danish Moler now weighs 270 grams, and it was 155 to start with. Sorry, I realised I've been doing that off camera. And then the Orchid top Seramis, which is the larger, chunkier grade Seramis, now weighs 220 grams, and it was 94 grams to start with. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these over a 7-day period and check how quickly they dry off. In the meantime, I will be doing another test using organic media, which I will publish separately. I'm kind of running these in tandem while we're moving house because I have no orchids in the house at the moment. I started this experiment right at the beginning of lockdown and had to kind of redo it because I hadn't washed things properly. So I had dust that got removed when I did the first wash, so the weight went down. So I've been doing this for quite some time now, but moving house and having no orchids to fuss over at the moment has given me the push I need to actually get on with these media tests. So I'll be right back, which will not seem long to you, but will be in 7 days time, to check the weight after a week and see how quickly things are drying out. After 7 days, we are back with the scales to check how much water they have lost over a 7-day period, which will help us to examine how they retain moisture. If you're going to use them as a normal media, it would tell you how fast a wet-dry cycle will occur and how often you should water. In a semi-hydroponic setup with a reservoir of water, it may also tell us to what extent the dry top layer is going to be present and how well they retain moisture within the pot. So we're going to measure the Kaizen Danish Moler first. A 0 to an empty cup. So that is now reading at 221 grams. Which is down from 270 grams. The small Seramis is now reading at 171 grams, down from 231. And the large Seramis is now reading 162 grams, down from 220. So I'll pop them up on screen as to how much water they've lost per cup in a space of a week's time. So we are now going to wait 7 days and check the top layer and see how this dries over time and whether the wicking efficiency is such as the media can use the reservoir water to wick all the way up to the top and keep the top layer nice and moist, or whether it dries out and whether this is different between the small grade and large grade Seramis, and we'll be back in 7 days to check on that. So I filled a water reservoir up to the same level for all of the Seramis pots and it's gone. The media has sucked it all up for all of them. So that means that the wicking efficiency is very high, and it's also wet right up to the top for all of the grades of media. So these are the two Seramis pots. We've even got a bit of mould starting on the top on that one, which is a little bit gross. And this is the Danish Moler Clay, and again that's really moist all the way up to the top. So what I find interesting is when I've tried this with different media, there has still been a reservoir left. Maybe where the wicking efficiency was less, so the media wasn't absorbing the water as well, so the water stayed in a little reservoir at the bottom, whereas the media that absorbs the water really well very quickly distributes it up to the top and then it evaporates. So the media that absorbs the water the best also maybe causes the highest level of evaporation, and I do think that Seramis is extremely moisture retentive, whatever grades you put it in, and the Danish Moler has pretty much identical properties to the small grade Seramis, other than the pH and the kind of slight difference I think in chemical composition with the fizzing that you get almost when you put water on it. So that's my Seramis test. So in summary, to compare the results, if we first look at the pH of the different media, I have included LECA on here as this was performed in the other test at the same time. We can see that Danish Moler has the lowest pH out of all of these, suggesting that it is a different material with different properties to the Seramis. pH is important as it affects how the plants are able to absorb nutrients. Different nutrients are absorbed at different pHs, with the optimal range cited between 5.8 and 6.2 for nutrient absorption across the board. However, there are some nutrients that are absorbed higher up and some that are absorbed better lower up. So it's also good practice to kind of swing the pH a little bit in what you're feeding, so occasionally feeding at a higher pH as opposed to the normal 5.8 to 6.2. So the medium that we are using affects how much we have to pH down because of the intrinsic properties. Organic medium has an intrinsically acidic pH, so not really much adjustment necessary, whereas inorganic pH adjustment is probably more necessary for optimal growth. Not to say that the plants won't grow well when fed at a kind of neutral to slightly alkaline pH, and this varies across different orchids. And the orchid roots themselves can and will alter the pH of the medium, so it's something that's a little bit difficult to control, but worth definitely bearing in mind, specifically if you're using medium with a pH away from the optimal. Then if we are to look at how much water the medium initially held at saturation, so after a 24-hour soak in water, how much did it hold? And then how much it retained after 7 days, we can see that Seramis overall retained more moisture than the Danish Moler Clay. The small Seramis retained very slightly more than the large, although it's actually not that different. I think there is a maximal point that you can reach almost with a material, and Seramis seems to be very, very good at holding on to water. I've included LECA in a test that was done at the same time again, in the same conditions as a kind of baseline for you to observe the differences, although that full medium test was performed with many, many more materials than just this. It was done at the same time, so I can include this, although I haven't focused on it in this experiment. Seramis as a material retains a lot more moisture than LECA, irrespective of the size of the medium, although obviously the larger Seramis will have more air gaps, so size is very important, but in terms of the actual moisture retention ability, the Seramis size doesn't actually seem to make that much difference in the pot. Either way, Seramis and Danish Moler Clay are both much more moisture retentive options than LECA would be, so they could be used alone or in combination with other materials such as LECA to provide that perfect kind of air to moisture balance in the pot for different orchids. And overall I find Seramis to be an extremely useful tool in preventing dry top layers, but as mentioned, this does come with other drawbacks such as algae and mold formation at the top of the medium. So there are pros and cons to both. Dryness isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's a porous dry layer that can damage new root tips, and using inorganic materials in different ways, we can balance the moisture ratio in the pot differently, and using a non-porous, non-wicking top layer of just river rocks, polished pebbles, you can prevent this kind of mold formation at the top with the Seramis, while also not having difficulties with dry porous top layers sucking moisture from roots for some orchids. For those of you who want to try a more porous, more moisture retentive inorganic medium to mix with LECA or alone, but don't have access to Seramis, which is available mostly in Europe because it is manufactured in Germany, you can potentially try a small grade pumice, a large grade perlite, small crushed lava rock. There's plenty of other inorganic options. Bonsai suppliers have a great range as well, so it's worth just buying a few and testing out in little cups, and then trying with a couple of orchids to see how you can balance this moisture to air ratio in the pots optimally in your environment using inorganic materials. And this goes for organic materials as well, honestly. It's worth just trying out a few different sizes and brands and materials and just playing around to see how you can best balance the little microenvironment within the pot to best suit each of the type of orchids that you're growing, as the environment in question greatly influences what goes on within the pots and the kind of air to moisture ratios, which is really what's important for each type of orchid. Although semi-hydro is a term coined for using a reservoir and a wicking system, using LECA as a material, it's actually a much more flexible growing method than just LECA alone. You can play around with plenty of other inorganic or organic materials to create a semi-hydroponic or self-watering, constantly moist wicking system that works for you in your environment. I hope that you found it interesting, and I guess my take home from this is if you can't find small Seramis, there are other materials that maybe you can replicate the properties of Seramis, like Danish Moler, or maybe even like a smaller grade of whatever media you're using, Pumice, LECA, that sort of thing. Hope you've enjoyed this video and found it useful and learned a bit more about Seramis. Thanks so much for watching today, and if you have any comments then leave them down below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more regular orchid updates. I'll see you guys all later. Bye!